So welcome everybody. I'm Karen Trout. I'm the Community Engagement Librarian at Kalamazoo Public Library. And we're thrilled to have you all here to hear from Heidi McCrary about her new book. It appears that many of you already know her, and that's great that she's got your support. I enjoyed reading the book. I loved all of the local references, having lived here much of my life. And it was really grabber. It just, I could just read it all the way through in a couple of sittings and really enjoyed reading it. So with that, I'm going to sort of keep my eye on other people as they arrive and be sure to let them in. I know Heidi wants to do a couple of readings. She has some special guests with her that perhaps you haven't met them. So I'm gonna just start. Heidi, tell us a little bit about how this book came to be. What is the origin of it?
Yeah, Karen, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be at a party with you. And for all of you who don't know Miss Karen, she is the Community Engagement Librarian at the Kalamazoo Public Library, and she is a literary rock star in the area. So it's, you know, it's a big deal to be at a party with Karen. I wrote a book. It's called Chasing North Star, and and it is a novel. It is a novel that is inspired by a true story, ours. And it started out actually as a memoir. And I should back up a little bit. This is my sister Hannah. Hello. And this is my sister Sylvia. Hello. And the reason that they're here with me is because they're part of the story. And there actually are 5 of us, 5 siblings, although in the book you read about 4 of the kids. I had all 5 of us. It started out as a memoir, and it included all 5 of us. And after a few drafts and working with an editor, the editor suggested that I lose a sibling, which is, you know, kind of empowering. So I erased Fred, and I've asked for his forgiveness, but so I erased a sibling, and the story is about 4 kids growing up in the 70s, which is a time when you could be killed by lawn jarts, and so it was a challenging time and a fun time in 1970. But aside from the it's a bittersweet coming of age story, and it's about a band of siblings that are trying to survive a mother who suffers from a cocktail of mental illnesses. And the book, I think, is, well, it certainly has its dark moments, but it also, I think, is endearing. I think there's parts of it that are, you know, they're actually funny. And the reason why I started writing the book is many years ago, Hannah and we belonged to a book club, and we were reading The Glass Castle, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that novel by Jeanette Walls. And it's about a dysfunctional family, and you know, there's nothing as entertaining as a dysfunctional family. And as we were reading The Glass Castle and we were discussing it at our book club, Hannah and I were also talking about our own family, and we were sharing stories of our childhood. And I don't know if it was just the wine talking, but we were entertaining them, and we were having so much fun talking about our childhood that we realized that we were onto something. And that's when I started writing the book. It started out as, it actually was called Chasing Crazy. The working title was Chasing Crazy for a long time. And it's funny, the funny thing about that title is once I found a publisher, the first thing they did was flag the title as being insensitive. So it changed from Chasing Crazy to Chasing North Star. And if I think several of you have read the book already, you probably understand Chasing North Star. The reason for that title is kind of two-found. One is the North Star, of course. There's a reference to it in the book, but there's also a reference to a train that's called the North Star. The train in the book actually kind of plays It almost plays like another character in the book. It's about a small, Chasing North Star is about a small town in Michigan, Alamo, which is where we grew up. And when we grew up, there was a train that ran by the house every day. And we would dream about hopping on this train and taking it to Bloomingdale and even further to Chicago. And so, you know, it kind of plays a role in the story as well. If you don't mind, I'm going to read a segment. Is that all right with everyone?
Yeah.
It's just a short. Here we go. Damn, Sylvia said, jumping to her feet. Mickey didn't move, and we watched as the two men bounded out the door after our mother and tackled her to the ground in the middle of the yard. The driver struggled to hold her while his partner forced her arms into a straitjacket. He then rolled our mother over and pushed her face into the grass as the other man fastened the back of the jacket. How many people get to say they've worn a straitjacket? I imagine that being unable to use your arms would really mess with your balance. And if you happen to fall, you're going down like a sack of potatoes. As all of this went through my head, I realized that most kids would probably be horrified at the sight of their mother being hauled away in a straitjacket. Should I have been crying? As the men escorted our mother to the ambulance, I felt relieved. A car came up the road, and as it approached our yard, it slowed down, and a woman in the passenger seat peered out her window, her eyes wide and her mouth hanging open as she watched our mother, still in her straitjacket, strolling to the ambulance like she was just going out to get the mail. If our mother's arms weren't wrapped around herself, I imagine she would have waved to the passing car. So that's just a segment of a small part of the book. And that, you know what, that was just another day in Alamo.
In our household.
My thought is, while we're going along here, kids, if you have any questions, please feel free to either, I think Karen said you can post them in the chat window. Karen, do we have a question? Or where's Karen?
I'm here. Yeah, I was on mute. No, someone had made a comment in the chat about loving seeing your sisters there with you.
Well, if you do have questions, gang, now's the time to ask them. It took, I started chasing North Star, it was 2013. So it's been about 7 years from start to finish. And I make a joke that writing the book was the easy part, and that finding a publisher was a whole nother program. I tried the traditional route of looking, you know, generally you try to find the traditional route, you try to find a literary agent, and that was the first thing I was attempting to do after I wrote the book. And, you know, good luck with that. Today, it's very hard, especially if you write something that is along the memoir lines, because today what literary agents are looking for right now really big is sci-fi, fantasy. So unless your protagonist in your book has wings or superpowers
Or dragons.
good luck getting published. So it was hard trying to find a literary agent that is interested in a memoir today, because I would get feedback when I would send my manuscript out, you know, great writing, but this isn't what we're looking for right now. That's not what they're looking for. So after I exhausted that route of trying to find a literary agent and going the traditional route, I decided to take the next step. And that was looking at hybrid publishers or independent publishers, not the big four or the big five. And the first thing I did is I went to a publisher called She Writes Press, and it is an indie publisher that caters to women writers, and they don't accept just anyone. You have to send your manuscript to be accepted. And I sent them my manuscript, and they said, yeah, let's do it. So I was thrilled to work with She Writes Press. It is a great publishing company, and it's a hybrid publisher. And what that means is when you work with a traditional publisher, there's no out-of-pocket costs. The publisher pays for everything. Now, the downside, that's of course the upside. The downside is that when you sell a book, you make pennies on the dollar. Now, when you work with a hybrid publisher, instead, you share the costs, and then when you sell a book, you share the profits. So from that end, you come out way ahead. And so it's just been a real pleasure in working with the indie publisher. And I think independent publishers have allowed a voice for authors and women in particular that probably wouldn't be published in any other fashion. So it was a real treat in working with those guys.
What about your writing process, Heidi? How were you writing all day long? How did you balance, and what did it look like for you?
Yeah, good question. I have a day job, and so my writing generally takes place during the evenings and during the weekends. And of course, in the summertime, you're off having fun. And so my writing had generally been during the winter season, and which has worked out so well for me because my husband teaches at Bittersweet Ski Resort. And so we don't see each other basically during the wintertime, which is why we've been married for so long. And so that's the time when I'm not a skier. And so that's my writing time. And so during the winter season is when I get most of my writing in. And then of course, during the, during the evenings, during the weekends, and when I have time, I'm a marketing person by day. And so that's my day job.
Do you actually write, or do you type, or?
I'm in marketing for my day job. I have a boutique advertising agency, and I also, I am a writer. And I write for, I'm a contributor to Moxie magazine, which was formerly Women's Lifestyle.
Oh, yeah.
They just changed their name to few months ago to Moxie magazine. So I'm a regular contributor to that. And I also write, I'm a blogger. I write for online and on my website, HeidiMcCrary.net.
And I meant, when you were writing the book, do you do it typing, or do you sit down and write it longhand?
Oh my gosh, no, I type. Does anyone write anymore? I don't even know if that's a thing, is it?
Well, who knows?
Well, I do want my siblings to jump in. They haven't jumped in much. I do have a fun story about when I was writing them, when it was still a memoir. It wasn't a novel yet. And I was a few drafts in, and I decided it was to the point where I could share it with these guys. And Hannah's been reading it from the get-go. She's been my proofreader. She devours literature, and she's she just loves reading. So she's been my proofreader, my beta reader. Sylvia's not a big reader. And when I had her read my book, and like I said, it was a few drafts in, and I printed it and I gave it to her to read and get her feedback, and she had it for quite a while, and I finally said, Sylvia, what do you think? And she goes, I said, did you like it? And she goes, yeah. And I went, yeah? And she goes, and she goes, yeah, it's good. And I'm like, really, it was good? And I said, did you read it? And she goes, I skimmed it. To which I said, you're in it. How could you just skim it? And she goes, I lived it. I didn't need to read it. That was really what she said. And then I asked her, and I'm going to let her answer it. I said, so what do you think about how I wrote about our mother? And she said,
She wasn't mean enough.
her feedback was that I didn't make our mother.
She was way too nice.
You know, and so I went back in and I tried to mean her up. And
It's just too hard.
Which, however, and we've talked about this, I'm younger than my siblings, and they protected me.
She's the baby of the family. Yeah.
And they remember things that I have no recollection of.
Mhm.
So they protected me from a lot of these things. And so my version is different from their version. And while I tried to meet her up, I decided that that really wasn't, that's not my story. This is, you know, this is my story and this is my truth. And
Yeah.
it makes me think about Mommy Dearest.
Uh-huh.
I think her name was Christine, the daughter who
Christina, I
wrote
think,
Mommy
yeah.
Dearest, Christina.
Joan
When
Crawford.
she wrote about Joan Crawford
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, that apparently she was an abusive mother, I remember when she wrote it, the news stories came out about the siblings saying,
Mhm.
she wasn't mean.
A
You're
brother
just
said
making
that.
it up. And it made me think about our, you know, what our truth
Yeah.
is. Sylvia's truth is very different from mine and Hannah's. We, you know, we all remember differently, and it doesn't make anyone right or wrong. It's just our truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I decided not to mean her up. And, you know, that's just my story. And I also didn't want to paint a picture of I thought it was very important not to paint a picture of a monster, because, you know, she obviously had her good traits, and
Oh,
she
yeah.
was a human being, and she suffered from mental illness. And I didn't want to paint a monster. I wanted people to understand where she was coming from. And where I veer off the book being a memoir and into a novel, for the most part, is when I talk about our mother's backstory in Germany. I know very little. The truths are that she had an abusive mother, she suffered from mental illness, and she spent time in an orphanage and was later raised by her aunt and uncle. But the other details, I made up. They're fiction to carry the story along.
But she lived through World War II in Germany when the bombs were falling. And at a young age was when she also developed epilepsy. So she had a hard life growing up. Nancy. Nancy.
Heidi, I wrote the review. I really enjoyed the book, but just your comments right now about saying how you decided not to mean her up. I'm really kind of glad you did that, because it still makes her a sympathetic character in there. You know, you can certainly, I think my comment to you later, not in the review, was that after reading the book, I just felt like I wanted to hug you and never let you go, because I could just picture this little 9-year-old going through, you know, what you went through and everything. But because you didn't mean her up, I could deeply sympathize, you know, with your family and your mother, you know, as well. It wasn't her fault. And so I just think that that wasn't the picture I had of a mean, horrible mother. Of course, you know, it's not my story, it's your story, but I was glad that I could still really sympathize and see that she absolutely still had that love for the kids and, you know, tried to make life normal. I mean, to me, it was incredible, the picnic at the rest area and all those things. I mean, it was to try to
be normal.
Yeah, be normal, you know, a semblance of great family life, going to the drive-in and all those kinds of things. So I think you portrayed your mother in a, you know, in a very good way for readers who didn't know her. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you. That's what we wanted to get across. And one of the things that I have found endearing is when oftentimes when people finish my book and they're telling me about it, the first thing they say is, you know, let me tell you about my act of childhood. You know, we've all had colorful childhoods, and it all makes us what we are. And you know, it doesn't have to define us, our childhood. We don't have to be victims. I think it is obvious. It made us closer. You know, it made us a unit and a strong family, the siblings. And, you know, it's all good.
Yeah.
And it was our normal.
We didn't know any better.
Yeah. Right.
Right. I thought about that too. I mean, you weren't aware as you were growing up that this wasn't what other people experience or whatever.
Well, I kind of was when I was maybe being the oldest girl in the family. I remember at night we'd walk around the neighborhood, and walking past our neighbor's house and looking in their front window, and they all look like a happy family. And I remember thinking, wow, that's what a normal family is like.
Yeah.
You know, but then, yeah, I thought everybody else lived like you see on television. Everybody else was normal. They all had happy times. I thought that we were the only weird family in Alamo. But then when you get older, you talk to your friends, you find out, oh, so-and-so, they had issues too. And it's like you grow up and you realize, no, I wasn't the only one. And in that respect, this book it helps people to discuss stories like this. I think it helps people a lot.
So Hannah, about how old were you when you realized that your family wasn't normal? Because that would give the perspective.
Oh, I was very young, because when my mother, she had epilepsy, and she had severe form, you know, with the grand mal seizures. And also she suffered greatly from depression. She was a very depressed person. And just the fights she would have with my dad and with us, that was normal for us.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Other questions? Did you have another passage you wanted to read, Heidi?
I was just going to say, if you don't mind, I'm going to read one more.
Yeah.
And it won't take too long. All right, here we go. Did I hear the record player? I turned around to find our mother standing in the kitchen doorway, and I knew there was no good answer to her question. Yeah, Mickey answered quickly. I played one of my records. I put the lid down and made sure I turned it off. I should have jumped in to admit that I was the one who touched the record player, but I didn't. Sit down, Mickey. Mickey took a seat at the picnic table, and his eye twitched as he watched our mother dig through the kitchen drawer. She smiled, apparently having found what she was looking for, and pulled out the butcher knife, presenting it like a new necklace she had just purchased at Gilmore's department store. She gazed lovingly at the knife for a few moments before gliding over toward our brother, moving to the beat of a dramatic soundtrack that only she could hear. Stopping in front of my brother, she leaned forward and she put her mouth to Mickey's ear. I'm going to help you, she whispered. I'm going to dig that nervous twitch out of your eye, fixing you once and for all. Do you hear me? She was right about Mickey being nervous, and no doubt she had managed to pump up the volume on that involuntary twitch 2 more levels. Mickey looked over to our father, who seemed preoccupied with the day's crossword puzzle, probably wishing that his children could just take it from their mother without talking back and stirring her up. Our father closed the dictionary and picked up his pencil to write down a word. Meanwhile, I stood over the heating vent, trying to be as still as the air. At that moment, Mickey was likely regretting making that 16-mile bike ride to the Plainwell Sanitarium to deliver a bouquet of wildflowers to our mother. Beautiful Indian paintbrushes, black-eyed Susans, and daisies. Leaving them at the front desk, he was leery that they would actually reach our mother. Turned out she actually did receive them, and for the next few days after returning home, Mickey was her favorite. But it didn't last long. It never lasted long. For God's sake, Mickey, stop jerking around and sit still, our father warned, apparently having just noticed what was going on 3 feet from him. Our mother twirled the knife in her hand so that the blade caught the reflection of the afternoon sun, streaming in through the kitchen window, and light splashed across her dark eyes. Our father looked over to our mother, apparently sizing up the situation. Sit still seemed like a weird request in this instance. Run seemed like better advice to give a kid whose mother was coming at him with a butcher knife. I could hear my heart beating, praying it couldn't be heard from across the room. Perhaps aware of her audience, she brought her face to within inches of Mickey's and slowly raised the knife. And with the tip of the blade, she gently touched his eye. And that was another day at the Phillips house.
Wow.
People often ask, because this is a novel based on a true story, people often ask me, you know, what parts are true and what parts are fiction. And for the most part, the things that happened between us kids and my mother, that stuff, that's all the true stuff.
Yeah, my mother grabbed the butcher knife out of the door so often
Yeah.
that she'd walk over there and we'd almost ready. Okay, it's time to run.
Yeah. We'd run out. He'd run outside. Bobby, Bobby, look, he's got the knife drawer open again. You know, and he'd come in and try to wrestle the knife away from her before she hurt herself or one of us. And yeah, that's just the way it was.
It sounds horrible, but the only way we can look at it is through laughing.
Yeah, we're not being insensitive
No.
towards mental health at all, because it's such a serious subject. But
From a kid's
when
perspective,
you
that's
live
how you
through
deal with
it, yeah, we would. I remember as kids, you know, when we would run out of the house fearing for our lives, we would run to the woods, and we would get together and talk about our lives and maybe running away from home, or
I've done it.
you know, and it was hard, but we all got through it, and we're stronger for it. Gosh darn it! And it does make for a good story.
Sandy shared in the chat that sometimes we use laughter to cope.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
About
Yep.
your laughter right now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nancy, did you have something?
Obviously I read the book and all that, but how was it resolved? I mean, as adult children, how was it at the end, like before your mother died? How were you with your mother before then? What kind of relationship, if any, did you have?
I was never close to her. I mean, there was only one instance where I felt I could get close, but it lasted like a day. But these
Well,
two
she kind
became,
of broke your heart. Sylvia was the first one of us to get married, the first one to have children, and looking lashed out at your kids. And
constantly.
Mama Bear, Sylvia,
Yeah.
Mama Bear woke up and
Yeah, at one
and-
point she chastised me in front of my kids so badly, it reminded me of being a child. I'm going, I will never subject my children to this again.
that's it.
And that was it.
Yeah, and I don't blame you at all
Yeah.
for that. I don't know. She was our mom, and we always knew our father was 16 years older than our mom. So it was inevitable that he would probably die first. And I remember, again, was when we were young and talking, we would think, what are we going to do when Bobby passes away? We called our dad Bobby. That's the German word for Papa. And we thought we'd have to have her institutionalized. We really did. But then as we got older, I don't know, we just tried to be sympathetic and try to be as understanding, which was rough at times, but we tried to help her the best we could because she was our mom. And if it wasn't for us, she probably would have been out in the streets.
And Nancy,
Where did she live? I mean,
Nancy, she really didn't get better. She just got old.
Well,
And so she didn't hold that power over us anymore, and
yeah.
we could take care of ourselves.
but also when our father passed away, we took charge and we made sure she was finally putting on the right medication. That's so important. The medication for epilepsy, it's some strong stuff, and you have to take it every day at the same time. And we made her do it. We made her take charge. We made her take care of herself. We made her take her pills when she was supposed to. That's what caused a lot of her depression, is she would get upset and she'd stop taking her pills. And that would, then she'd have seizures. She'd get, oh yeah, there were a couple drug overdoses, as Heidi explains in her book, where they came and took her, you know, ambulance. It really
did she live at home? Did she stay at home, or
Yes.
where did she end up? Where did?
After, let me see, when my father passed away, we immediately moved her into an assisted living facility.
No, she went to the apartment.
Or you're right.
Yeah.
We immediately moved her into a senior apartment in Westwood, close to both our houses. And she blossomed there. She did very well. We would ride our bicycles to her house and visit her. She made friends in the apartment. We knew that if she stayed in Alamo in that house, that she would die in that house and we'd never get her out. So we all pitched in. It was a lot of work, but you know, she was, like I said, she was our mom. If we didn't do it, who would? And so we all worked hard, and our husbands, bless their hearts, they met our mother and they married us anyway. We always say that. And we all worked and took care of her. And she lived, boy, I think 16, 17 years after my father passed away. And she lived in the apartment for quite a few years. And then she got worse. She stopped taking her pills. We had to call the ambulance. They took her to the hospital. That went on. And with each time, she would go to a different assisted living, and then, you know, more assisted living that watched her more closely. She lived in several different places.
Got picked out once.
Oh yeah, we won't discuss that, Sylvia.
There were still down moments.
There were down moments. She had her episodes, but because we took charge and made sure she took her medicine, she was better. And there were, you know, for a while there, we were a normal family.
I wouldn't go that much.
How old was she when she passed away?
I think she was 79 or 80.
79?
No, what year was it? Do you remember the year?
No. Got some homework.
I was thinking it was 2011.
Yes, yeah.
But
They were Medicare.
she lived for 16, 17 years after my father passed away.
82.
Maybe,
It was
yeah,
2011.
yeah. She
We did
spent,
about 17 more years than we thought.
yeah. After one of her many episodes where she had a seizure and she was choking, and they took her by ambulance to Borges Hospital, and she was in a coma there for a couple of weeks. I'm sorry, we shouldn't be laughing, but it is kind of funny. And the doctors said,
I remember this story.
"You need to get her out." And they said, "Oh, this is horrible."
They took her back to nursing home. Thinking she was going to die there.
They turned off everything.
Yep.
No food, nothing.
We can't tell this story.
And then she lived. I'll tell the punchline.
Oh my
I'm
God.
telling you by her bedside. I wasn't there, okay? So I can probably tell this better than most. And they're just chatting away.
We're talking about old times when our mother is in a coma. I swear weeks have gone by.
So then suddenly,
She wakes up, she opens her eyes, and she smiles at me.
Hey, ladies, I feel like something has happened to your sound. I don't know if suddenly you've gotten kind of faint. Does anybody else notice that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds tinny.
Are we better now?
the cat was on there.
I can't.
I don't know, I can't do anything, Heidi.
You sound far away.
I don't know what to do.
We can,
Oh, that was better.
Now it's better? Is that better?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, but the long story
Yes.
short, 6 days in a nursing home, she was on her deathbed, she was dying. No water, no food, nothing. She opens her eyes when we were there visiting her,
She was
Yeah.
completely,
and she lived for 7 more years. It was a miracle. It was a miracle. She lived for 7 more years in the nursing home.
Wow.
And yeah, it's a true story. It was a miracle. And it was wild. My mother, yeah. Only Mutzi.
I was there too.
Yeah, Dave was there. My husband was there.
It was a curse.
Poor Heidi, she was like face to face with her mother. And she opened her eyes and said, "Heidi?" And Heidi collapsed in the corner. I mean, she sat down in the chair in the corner of the room, just amazed.
It was amazing. It was a miracle. 7 more years.
I'm curious, Heidi, if the writing of the book was cathartic for you in any way, or?
It was for me.
I think so. And it made me realize, you know, I used to think as Hannah and Sylvia were saying, you know, we used to think we were the only weird family in town. And we've learned since, of course, that we're all weird in one way or another. If you know, if you don't think there's a black sheep in your family, it's because you are the black sheep.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, and I think it's good for everyone to read, as Hannah was saying, because, you know, we all have colorful childhoods.
Well, and just by virtue of the fact that there are lots of books like yours, you know, written either as memoir or as fiction. Yours is sort of that hybrid mix, but people do like to read that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, there's a new movie on Netflix with Glenn Close.
Oh, I
the
want to see that.
the Hillbilly Elegy.
Oh,
yeah, right.
I want to see that. Yeah.
Same storyline.
Yeah.
And of course it's entertaining.
And I want to emphasize, we are not laughing at mental health issues. It is such a serious problem. It's just that we lived through all this, you know, and it was bizarre. That's all we can say. It was bizarre.
Well, I've done what every good librarian should do and created, or I didn't create these, but I found some book lists of some comparable books that might be of interest to you. And so I'm just going to post links to those in the chat. The first one, they're books that are similar to Glass Castle. And it's a list that was created by Seattle Public Library. And the other two lists are specifically for people of color or written by people of color. And one is a list of memoirs and the other is a list of fiction about dysfunctional families. And I just feel like it's appropriate that we share all of those. And if any are of interest to you, please feel free to use them however you wish. As I say, I didn't create them, but I'm happy to share them. So those will be popping up here.
Wonderful, Karen.
Heidi, having been to several festivities in the woods that you now own, how close was that to your home when you were off running over there for safety, for solitude, for support from each other? How far was that from your home?
It's pretty much across the road. It's kitty corner. So it was right there. We own that land. It ran right alongside, which is what is the Calhaven Trail today. That was the railroad tracks. So we grew up right at the corner of 6th Street and Hart Drive, right by Fricano's restaurant.
So the railroad tracks were functioning at that time, the Calhaven?
Oh, yes, they were.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was kind of a highlight of our lives. Every day we go out and wave at the conductor as he drove by. That was like, you know, ooh, big deal.
The other thing I wanted to say, my parents were also in World War II in the Netherlands during this time. And as you have said, you know, your history makes who you are. The history you have together as siblings and that support that you have, you were always looking out for each other. And that came through in the book so clearly. And I really appreciated and held on to that aspect, that you have somebody who's there to watch your back and who's always there to take care of you. And that's what carries with you and your siblings. That's what carries you into your next generation. And
Amen.
That to me was just so very amazing, that all of you looked out for each other. And I know your boys and I know you, and they are so fortunate that all of you stuck together and held each other through it all. Because can you imagine if you would have only been an only child, or if you didn't have all 5 of you there, you know?
Yeah.
it would have been so different. So I just,
Mhm.
I really clung to that. And I don't know, it just was, it's an amazing book. It's an amazing story. I know it was probably hard to write and hard to reflect, but also, you know, very helpful. And you shared so many wonderful things, and I appreciate your sharing your story. I just really appreciate that.
Thank you. Our pleasure. And, you know, I am blessed.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Heidi, you mentioned to me that if there were book groups that were interested in reading your book as a book group, that you would be interested or willing to meet with them.
Absolutely, Karen. If COVID ever leaves our lives and book clubs start meeting again, I am absolutely available for book clubs. If you actually are doing virtual ones, you know, we can do it just like this too. So,
Right. Yeah.
you know, yeah, I would be glad to meet with any of your book clubs if you're in one. You can also keep up with my writings at HeidiMcCrary.net. And if you are interested in any, I know a lot of you actually already have my book, but if you are interested in any additional autographed books, you can pick them up at Kazoo Books in Kalamazoo.
Any other questions or any parting words? Or I don't want to rush us out of here, but no?
Nope, our pleasure.
Well, thank you so much, Heidi. Let me come back on. Just want to thank you again for sharing this story, for sharing your sisters with us. And I know you have a lot of support here with people that know you, and it's been really great fun to set this up with you, and we wish you all the best. Cheers.
You're here.
Yeah,
Cheers,
cheers,
everyone.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm loving the book.
Thank you. Yes, I will check
Thanks,
on it
Karen.
too.
Okay, we'll see ya.
Thanks, Heidi.
Bye.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. And Heidi can